Welcome to Tokunbo. My name is Jola Naibi, and in this limited podcast series, I'll be having conversations with Nigerian storytellers living in the diaspora. We will talk about the stories they tell, the way the stories are told, the way the stories are received, and so much more. Welcome to Tokunbo.
I want to hear what Chinwe Achebe has said. I want my children to be aligned with what Wole Soyinka has said. So I think it's important when we talk about, recycling oral traditions.
Things like that, kind of make you feel like you are from somewhere. Actually, you belong somewhere. You have roots.
On today's episode of Tokunbo, we have not one but two guests who have an interesting inroad into the Nigerian diaspora storytelling experience. Let's listen in. Welcome to the podcast. On today's episode, I have Peju, the Spark Abuchi, who is a poetic speaker, therapeutic wordsmith, who believes in the power of curiosity connects humans and community. She's the author of a poetic Odyssey of Proclamations, showcasing 31 ways to sow, grow, and flow goodness into your life. Welcome, Peju.
Thank you.
I also have Eniye Oshunbiyi, who is driven by a desire to help people discover their true selves so that they can consciously flourish. She has written a reflective journal, 91 Days to Self-Awareness, which she describes as a sacred space to guide you towards deeper self-understanding. Powerful. Welcome, Eniye.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'd like to kick things off with a basic question centered around cultural roots and identity. You both live outside of Nigeria and have for a long time, and you are Nigerian, but you spent your formative years in the country. So I'll start with you, Peju. How would you say that your Nigerian heritage has contributed in shaping your approach to self-reflection and personal transformation?
Oh, wow. Me too. We're digging in. I think for me, I appreciate and deeply value that I'm Nigerian. I think first things first, I don't try and deny it. I don't try and hide it. I'm a very proud Yoruba girl. And I feel really grateful because I was brought up in a family where I feel like I was very loved. And I was very championed by my parents. They loved the sound of my voice. And that gave me more permission to speak up and own who I am. And I feel like for a lot of people who leave Nigeria or leave their country of birth and move to a different country and become part of the diaspora, there's a sense and maybe a fear that we need to stay in line. We need to be told do what we're told. We can't be adventurous. We can't be creative, or we might get into trouble. And I feel like the gift that I was given in terms of the mind frame I came to the UK with was the words of my parents ringing loud and clear and true in my ears saying, Peju, you're going to the UK to be a blessing. Wow. That country is lucky to have you. So it's not the other way around. Like, of course I was excited. I was coming here to start a degree and to pursue a master's. So there was a sense that I was excited, but the greater understanding was from the foundational roots that I had, that the UK is so lucky to have me. Whether they see it or not, that's not my concern. My concern is that I know that. So in the places and spaces that I show up, there's a sense of, I'm really here to do good. And I'm here to bring good. And that is my starting point. And I think as well, not shying away from the roots we have. So my roots in Nigeria are very regal. They're very royal. And for a lot of us who are brought up in different parts of Africa, there's a sense that we come here and we want to cower or be, hide things or play small. The calling in the diaspora, sometimes you feel like you're being called to play small and just blend in, be mediocre, just blend in. Why are you stepping up? Well, my regal roots are that I am a princess. I'm a princess of Ile-Ife. And I'm proud to say that my roots are regal, and I can come here and expand the worldview of royalty by sharing about my experience. I shared about my heritage and owning who I am.
Oh, wow. That is powerful. That is really powerful. I mean, I think there's a lot of power and tremendous blessing in knowing who you are, knowing where you come from, and holding on to that authenticity and not letting anything, shake it or waver it. Anyway, how would you say your cultural roots have defined your approach to self-reflection?
So really interesting. I think for me, like I was reflecting on this, and I've spent more of my life outside of Nigeria than I actually have spent in
Many
Nigeria.
of us have.
So it's interesting because
But let me interrupt just a second. Did you expect that to be the case when you left? Did you, because that's a question I'm glad you highlighted that. Did you expect that to be the case? I'm sorry I interrupted, but I couldn't resist.
No, not at all. Not at all. So it's interesting. I mean, just like Peju, I came to the UK to study. I came here for university, and then I did my master's, and I met my husband here, which is what kept me here in the UK.
Okay.
But when I look back at my life, my formative years when I was very young, we, myself and my family, my brother and I at the time, and my parents lived in the States because my dad was there on a course. And so we did, and then went back to Nigeria, and obviously my secondary school education was in Nigeria. I started university in Nigeria, but because, as we know, the Nigerian system, all the strikes and everything, my parents were like, this is no education, and then sent us here to the UK to study. So that's how I ended up here. But I never thought that my dream was always to go back and to establish myself in Nigeria, be a lawyer in Nigeria, and all of that. So when I think about that, I've had to really reflect that, gosh, I've been shaped by essentially 3 different continents. But I think just like what Peju was saying, there is something about being Nigerian. There's something about being grounded in the culture that just never leaves you. If you have lived there, if you have spent formative years of your life there, there's something, it shapes your values, it shapes your thinking, it shapes your sense of who you are. Now, I think coming into a different culture, there are things, and I think we're all brought up differently. Obviously, I had a very military father, and I didn't grow up kind of with that sense of express yourself and say what you think and all of that. So I've had to learn that. So my journey of self-discovery has been slightly different, from a different path. It's, I suppose, taking the good aspects of culture, and also kind of the good aspects of faith and what that brings. And, because obviously both culture and faith they can have very negative impacts as well, on a person and in your sense of who you are and what you do and don't do, what you say and don't say. So I think for me, it's been a real intentional journey of looking back, looking deep and thinking, okay, what are the good aspects of those things? How have they formed me? What do I appreciate about them? And learning to discard, the negative and hold on to the good.
Interesting. And I'm going to stay with you, Eniye, because one of the things that we all understand as Nigerians is the culture is rich with oral storytelling and verbs. There's a proverb for anything. As a Yoruba girl, I always tell people that we have greetings for sitting and standing. And you don't see. I mean, that's one of the things that makes me so proud to be Yoruba girl, because we have a story, a saying for everything. So my question is this: how do you weave these traditions into your writing and coaching practice when it comes to oral storytelling and proverbs? Is it something that shows up at all?
Interesting. So I'm not Yoruba, but I'm a Yoruba wife. So
we have adopted you.
So of course I have absorbed a lot of these things. And you're right, there's a greeting for everything. But it's interesting. I think my writing is sort of different. Last year I was on a podcast with a guy called Femi Akinyemi, and he really drilled into this kind of the cultural, sort of self-awareness within cultural contexts. And I think that, and I've coached clients as well who have a cultural and African. But I think that, as I was saying earlier, the elements of culture that keep us stuck, right? I suppose part of my work is, looking back in order to move forward. So I think, why are you the way you are? Why do you do what you do? And I'll give an example just for context. So I remember coaching a leader once who grew up in Africa and, just highly educated, but I think this plays to something that Peju said as well, because you come to this country and despite the amount of education that you have, the experience that you have, that you bring from your cultural context, you are told not good enough. You are told not. And so, you embed, kind of these stories, these negative, conceptions or perceptions of yourself. But until you're taken back to say, hang on a second, where is that narrative coming from? Or in the cultural context, you've been told children are meant to be seen, not heard, and then you come here and you grow and you're in a leadership position, but you still carry that narrative of, oh, I won't speak until I'm spoken to. And that doesn't then, so I think that really impacts. So I think part of my work is untangling those narratives in order to help, people to come into their true selves. And that's why, even the work that I've done on myself, unweaving unhelpful aspects of culture and embracing, the positives of it and allowing that to fuel you. But I think there is something around that. And I think that very much weaves into, if I am coaching a leader that has any kind of cultural context, behind them, it's where is that coming from, and being able to untangle that, being able to, unmask in a way the subconscious enemy that they're fighting, that they might not even know that that's where that narrative has stemmed from.
And what you said is really profound, because as parents, we have such a duty of care in terms of what we convey to our children, and how, we don't want our children to spend years of therapy healing from the time that they were with us. And there's so many people who that's their story, where the whole children should be seen, not heard, and it makes your voice so marginalized. And then you come into a space in, like in the UK, where your voice is already marginalized because you're not part of the dominant culture. So then how do you now make sure that your voice is heard, that the authenticity of your background is, shows up in a way that, I like what you said, regal, that you care, you matter. And one of the things I like about the way Peju describes herself is the way you call yourself a therapeutic wordsmith. And it goes into the deep sense of the way words heal, nurture, and bring out the best in people. And I wanted to also, go back to that question that I asked Eniye, how do you weave the oral storytelling, the proverbs, into the work that you do has, the spark, the poetic speaker? How does it show up in your work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I want to unpick a little bit what you were talking about, the power of the words we tell our children. I think parents are very in tune when you talk about the words that you use to build up or to break down your children. But I want to backtrack, and I want to say it is so crucial that you also choose words that are wise when you're speaking to your husband or wife. Because truly that's where it starts from. The kids, the children, listening. So how do you give to your children without first giving, if you're in a relationship, to your husband or wife or significant other? Just something to think about. It's not all about the children. Even adults, we need to build each other up with words. So I just wanted to make a point of that. And I think with the oral traditions, with the proverbs, I have a very vivid picture, and I say this a lot when I speak, a very vivid picture of my mother I'm one of 6, my mother with her 6 children, sitting around her when we were growing up. And my mom was very busy, very accomplished, lawyer, fashion designer, property developer, but she was present. And we would gather around my mom as 6 kids, and she would teach us first aid in English, and we'd go through proverbs, and we'd go through, as agile as a monkey, as black as coal, as white as snow. She was very present. And I think whether we realize it or not, and I'm grateful I realize it, is that those traditions just became a part of my psyche. That way of my mother being influenced the way that I wanted to be with my children. I wanted to be a primary educator in my children's lives. I wanted to be present. Now, I didn't want to homeschool, but I wanted to influence the way that they were educated, because I know, even coming from Nigeria, education is highly valued. And so I think as well, something that we try to do, my husband and I, when we're speaking to our children or we're speaking at events, is we want to use the words and the quotes of African leaders. Because we're so, yes, I want to hear what this American president said, Bill Clinton maybe, or George Bush, and I want to hear what maybe Margaret Thatcher said, but also I want to hear what African leader Chinua Achebe, I want to hear what Chinua Achebe has said. I want my children to be aligned with what Wole Soyinka has said. So I think it's important when we talk about, recycling oral traditions. In my home, I want there to be a balance, and sometimes I want to be an overbalance on the scale of, there are so many Black Africans from different parts of Africa, because we know Africa is not a country, it's a continent.
Yeah.
So there are many Black African leaders from different African countries who have said profoundly wise things. For me to regurgitate what they've said, I need to open myself to their words, to read different types of literature. Right now, I'm reading a book by Abi Dare called The Girl with the Louding Voice. And I've read Chimamanda Adichie's books. And so I think it's recognizing the power of the tales, the wisdom, the ideas that I was imbibed with as a child, making sure that is regurgitated in my psyche as I do life in the diaspora, but it's also empowering and heightening the voices of people who look like me. So that people who do not look like me and people who do look like me can have more of a balance of wisdom from our continent, because a lot of wise people have spoken from that place.
That's really deep. And I listened to you talk about your mother and the different hats that she wore, and it just made me realize that, not made me realize, but it kind of reinforced something that I already knew, that, the way we emphasize resilience, adaptability, perseverance. I always tell people, if you've lived in Lagos, you can live anywhere. You carry it with you. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but that's just always been my mantra, that if you've lived in Lagos, you can live it. And we don't need to go into details. We know what we're talking about. And I wonder, how have these principles, seeing your mom, that there has to be a story behind the story of the different hats that she wore. And that story probably has a foundation on resilience, adaptability, perseverance, knowing what the society was like, raising 6 children in any society is not an easy thing. So, how have these cultural principles influenced your personal journey and advice that you offer to others when it comes to, you have somebody who's going through something, like I said, lived in Lagos, can live anywhere. Somebody's going through something that looks just very, very minimal compared to what we've all gone through. And you're like, okay, sit down. Let me tell you something. How does that work for you?
It's wow. So we're in a society now that values youth, pain, to the extent that we so do not value the aging population.
Wow.
And I think I'm now in a gosh, I'm in a season of life where the generation above me my father passed away a few months ago
Our
at 8.
condolences.
Thank you. And my mom is still around. Thanks be to God for that. There is so much that these wonderful human beings can teach the world.
Mm.
But you're going to have to ask permission to hear this. But you're not going to ask permission if you're too busy being, old people, come on, move out. We need to get ahead. We need to do this. AI, come on. Where are the young people? Where's the strength? Where's the... And you're sidetracking the wealth of the wise, older people. And I once heard a saying that when an old person dies, a library burns down.
Wow.
That's deep. Yeah. That is
A
so true.
library literally burns down, and the heritage, the history, the part of our legacy dies. And if we've not valued those people when they've been alive, we've lost so much. I mean, we're making so many mistakes as humanity because we've not listened to our elders. There's a reason why older people have experiences and they've made mistakes and they've learned and they've grown in resilience and all that. There's a reason why they need to be the ones also speaking. Now, young voices are important, but not to the detriment of silencing older people.
Yeah.
There's so much wisdom. They've seen a lot of life, and we're doing ourselves a disservice by not listening. So I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for my parents. There's constant conversation about life as it was, as it is, as it will be. They ask for my opinion. They love the sound of my voice. I go back to when your significant people love the sound of your voice, you will treasure your voice. You will know you have something significant to bring. And for my mother, it was 6 children in 8 years. It wasn't just 6, she had 6 in 8 years.
So you guys are all close in age. That's
very close in age. And my mother says she could have advanced to a very high level in her legal practice. She chose to make more advances in family.
Wow.
And we're told as women, oh, you can have it all. You can excel in your career. You can excel in family. You can excel here in social media. You can excel with hobbies. My mom she says something will give.
Yeah.
And she would rather something gave in her career so that she could really build intentionally a family that she knew would stand the test of time.
Oh, wow. And the world is a better place because of that choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, listening to you talk, I see the depth of love that you have for your mom, and that's so beautiful. I no longer have a mom, so I can understand, the beauty, the power, and the passion that exists in the joy of having a mom. Still, one of the things that I listened when I heard you speak was the generational gap that exists within. I read somewhere, and it's funny, but it's true, that the generation before us think we're young, the generation after us think we're old, and so we're kind of like stuck in the middle.
We are the sandwich generation. We're
the sandwich generation, exactly. And one of the things that means is that, for instance, you get the generation after you to teach you about technology, but then you get the generation before you to tell you about the stories of how things were that you will pass on to the generation after you. So it's kind of like a cycle. I wanted to also go back to you, Eniye, in terms of the same question that I asked Peju, the cultural principles that have influenced your personal journey, the resilience, the adaptability, the perseverance in the work that you do when you're coaching people. How does that affect the advice that the other thing that we have in terms of resilience is one of the things that shows up is empathy. And looking at it through the lens of, I remember talking to an older American lady, and she said that I sometimes feel very invisible when I'm among people of your age. And the reason that is, and this is not to put this is not an indictment of anyone's culture, is there isn't that much reverence for the older people as we have, even just the way we greet when you go into a gathering and you see what's it called, an older person, and you get on your knees, and then you're honoring them. So, we have reverence for the older generation that we don't often see in other cultures, especially living in the diaspora. And so going back to my original question, Eniye, how do you see it coming up in terms of those little cultural principles that we probably took for granted when we were growing up, and now it shows up in a way that is a lot more vivid as we're in a different culture? How does it affect your personal journey and the advice you offer to others?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. As Peju was talking, one of the things that came to mind that I say to my children a lot is intelligence is not wisdom. You can be book smart, and a lot of people today in today's generation, old and young alike, actually pride themselves on intelligence, on being book smart. But actually, one of the things, I mean, we've all heard this saying, is that in Nigeria, a lot of common sense is not common, and you can meet someone who is very much advanced in age and yet very life immature. And yet you can meet someone who's young, and we look at those people and say, oh, you're wiser beyond your years. So as the saying goes, age is nothing but a number, really. But I think, speaking to your point about just the wisdom of the aged, I think in my practice, I do come across a lot of people who, there is a lot of wisdom that comes from, culture. Absolutely. That really blesses us with resilience, that really blesses us with, a sense of empathy, how we are taught to, the culture of respect, for example, how we approach people, that culture of empathy and how we receive people and how we give of ourselves to people. Like, I always say, when I think about my parents, for example, one of the greatest lessons that I learned from my parents is how to treat people, whether they are, the most important person in the country, or whether they are the people that really, work for you, your security guard. And I see the way my parents interact with these people. And so, I think, to answer your question, that has created this inbuilt, system or inbuilt culture of respect, how you show up with other people, respecting people, because you don't know tomorrow, you don't know who this person will be or how they will, bless your life or save your life. In fact, how you treat people really matters. And I feel like that's a really solid, grounding, cultural grounding that I got, because obviously, I look at the society that my children are growing up, or this generation, or sometimes we, as you go around, you observe, how young people treat old people. They're taught to, I remember a funny story once when one of my kids was young, and how they teach them the Declaration of Human Rights in school, or the rights of the child and everything. And I remember one day one of my kids came home with this little booklet and slammed it on the kitchen table and said, "Nah, I know my rights." That's like, well, good for you, I think. And that's important. Of course, we want our children to grow up knowing their rights, because we want them to uphold, boundaries, and we want to keep them safe. But I think one of the things is, knowing your rights does not give you the right to be disrespectful towards other people, showing empathy, showing compassion. Those are values, I would say, that are rooted, in our African culture. And I know in many other cultures, respect for the elderly, respect for your fellow human beings, respect, just generally is something that I think across cultures, but it's upheld more in some cultures, than in others. And so I think, even in working with leaders, in my practice, I think a lot of these things, a lot of what I've gained from being an African in diaspora, is the grounding of my values, absolutely the grounding of my values. And so sometimes, and self-awareness is helping people to come to an understanding of what shapes you. what drives you, what motivates you. And it's interesting, and it can be a really powerful moment where you bring someone to a level of self-awareness. I remember working with a female leader years and years and years ago, and I will never, but that was a really profound moment where, she just broke down and said, oh my goodness, I've lost every sense of value. And she came from a different country, in Europe, but had been taken on by this. I think Peju mentioned this very early on, climbing the ladder and success and this, that, and the other. And she's completely forgotten, who she lost herself in the culture that she's currently in, and started, as we were talking, as I was asking questions, realized that she, this culture, the culture, that her own culture, she's not African, but, her culture is grounded on, kind of respect for the elderly. She recognized that she's wanted to shut off, that aspect of her life, not being in touch with the elderly parents, being ashamed of where they come from, ashamed from not coming from wealth, because she's built this career in investment banking. And I think, it's really, really important for us to go back to those humble beginnings, and to say, actually, don't buy into the lie, that some societies tell you this is what validates you, this is what makes you who you are, this is what makes you, important. No, I think a lot of what we have got from, our culture, our values, our parents, our family backgrounds, those celebrations, bringing them in, to wherever we are in the world, wherever life throws us, and that's the thing. We live in a global village, and I think it doesn't mean that we should hide where we've come from or bury those things that have shaped us, that have made us who we are, today. So I think that's just so important. But that only comes from consciousness, being aware of the narratives that are driving our behavior, that are driving, the choices that we make, what we choose to accept, what we choose, be in tune. We live in a very noisy world. So be in tune. Otherwise, we end up losing ourselves, within whatever culture we find ourselves in. And I think, as Peju said, just to fit in.
Yeah. I mean, listening to you speak, I remember when I first moved away from home in Lagos, and I moved to the UK, and as a young girl, I got my first job, and my supervisor was a man who was probably older than my parents. And his name was, I can't remember what his last name was, but I called him Mr. whatever his last name was. And he was like, oh, you can just call me Sam. I'm like, Sam. So I now started calling him Mr. Sam. And I was the only one on the team that was calling him Mr. Sam. And everybody was like, why do you always put Mr. before Sam? I'm like, this man is old. He's probably older than my parents. It can't come out of my mouth like that to just start calling him Sam. And he's not my mate. And it goes back to the whole grounding of the whole cultural thing that I had been conditioned to give that respect to someone who was older than me, someone who, had more years than me, and to just call him by his name is not something that was easy for me to do. And that's part of the diaspora living experience. So I wanted to stay with you, Eniye, and living in the diaspora presents a lot of unique challenges, like the one that I explained, and then opportunities. How does navigating, and we've talked about this a little bit, but I think we need to just, dig deeper. How does navigating different cultural identities shape your perspectives on self-discovery and leadership?
Wow, what a question. What a question. So it's interesting, as I was thinking of this, I thought of a theme or a topic that comes up a lot when, working with leaders in the diaspora, and that's the theme of covering. Right? There is this thing about covering, masking, in it's known in some places. And I think there are times when, certain aspects of culture, maybe it's been drummed in that it's not acceptable or it's not enough, right? Not good enough or less than, I think that can be so powerful. And when people move from where they, like I never, living in, sure, I was very young when I lived in America. So a lot of things went over my head, to be fair. Living in Nigeria, you get this sense of I am who I am. I never even questioned or even asked myself one day, you're black. It's like, it doesn't even come up, right? And then you come to a different culture and you think, oh, people like me are not always accepted in every setting. And for the first time, you have to navigate that and wrestle what comes within. And if you don't have a very strong ground, I mean, listening to Peju, I'm just like, wow, but if you don't have, if a lot of people might not have that sense of those voices, in their heads, telling them you are royalty, telling them you are brilliant, telling them you are enough, telling them you are, it's just a lot of people in diaspora move because they want to create a better life for themselves or for their family. It's getting an education. And so a lot of people don't want to do anything to jeopardize that because they carry on their backs the livelihoods and the hopes and dreams of so many people. And so what they do is they try and fit in as much as they can, not to rock the boat. And there is a lot of empathy that needs to be shown for that, not judgment, because it is real. It is real. If you are the first in your family, for example, to move abroad or to go to university or to get a great job, and you have the opportunity to support, your aging parents back home or sick relatives or younger siblings or whatever, that's a huge burden to carry, right? A huge burden. And so navigating that is not easy. And so this is where that sense of masking can come in. This is where that covering can come in. Like, okay, I will hide a part of myself that is not acceptable, within the society that I find myself in order to survive. So it's a survival mechanism, actually, because you feel like sometimes you get the sense of, I just really admire what Peju was saying, that they are lucky to have you, right? When you go there. That's not the story of a lot of people.
Yes.
A lot of people are like, oh, you're lucky to be there, and therefore that if that's your paradigm, that's how you approach your life, in diaspora, is that, oh, I'm lucky to be here. So sometimes we play small in order to not rock the boat. Sometimes we accept, what's thrown at us, I remember the first time, in a job where I faced, what I would call discrimination, and I had to stand up against somebody that was really powerful. The fear that gripped me in doing that. And I only got through that because of one of my old university professors who, she and mentors, and she was, she's African, and she had gone through so much, to get to where she is in society as a professor, and, sharing with me. And the courage that she put into me to say, okay, you have two options. You can either back down or you can take this route, but it's not going to be an easy route. And that was one of the most painful things that I had to do in my life, to stand up to power, because I thought, oh my goodness, this is my livelihood. And at the time I was transitioning careers. I just left law and was, going into this new profession of project management, and thinking that, okay, this company is paying for my certification in this particular field and all of that stuff. So the fear that comes with that, and it took a lot of courage, but at a cost, at a real cost, because, that burnt me, that broke me. And it took years, truth be told. It took years to rebuild my confidence, to rebuild my sense of worth. And sometimes even today, I still feel and see the legacy, of that, So I think, it is a story of resilience, but sometimes that resilience comes at a cost, to a lot of people in diaspora. But it can be done. But I think it goes back to the values that shape us, and knowing that, we stand on the back of giants, right? Yeah. So we need to, it's channeling the lion within, channeling the giants that have gone before us, within. And finding that support system, that network of like-minded people to help to heal those wounds, because those wounds will come, without a doubt, they will come, whether you go looking for them or not.
Well,
But it's
true.
finding the community, finding the support, to heal those wounds and to find strength, in each other.
Thank you for that. And I'm glad you used the word community, because what ends up happening when you leave home to come and live in the diaspora, wherever you choose to live, is you now have to, especially when you're not coming with family, but I think we all came as single people, you have to now start to build your own community.
Absolutely.
And it's never an easy one, but it is something that you have to do in order to be grounded, in order to be able to preserve your identity. I think, I mean, if I have to say this, Peju, your parents gave you a great gift when they were sending you on your way, because in telling you that you are valuable, you deserve to occupy this space. Not a lot of people get that gift. And what ends up happening is you see a lot of people compromising their identity in order to fit in order not to be able to lose this, prestigious opportunity that they have that's not given to everyone. And I wonder, as a poetic speaker, how do you use your poetic language to evoke healing and self-awareness for those who need to reconnect with their roots, those who did not receive the gift that your parents gave you, but need to, preserve their identity in the diaspora? How does that work as a therapeutic wordsmith?
I like the way you roll that word, therapeutic wordsmith. I mean, I want to say the beauty of Eniye and I being here and speaking today is you're getting two perspectives. So you're getting the perspective of somebody who has come into the UK, into the diaspora, with a sense of blessing, in the sense that, my parents were like, wow, they don't know what they're getting. And you're getting a perspective of someone, Eniye is saying part of her journey was growing into that awareness that so lucky to have me. I have so much to give here. So I want to speak to the people who are listening, who are wherever you are in the diaspora. It can be done.
Yeah.
It can be given, or it can be gotten. If that makes sense. Your parents can give it to you, your significant family members can give it to you, or you can actually get it. It's not impossible. So I want to say that that's a great kind of two sides to the story, or two sides to a lot of stories, because different people come with different stories. I want to say being a part of the diaspora is a beautiful thing. I really do. And there's a talk that my husband and I did on Channels Television where we were being interviewed for Black History Month. And as a spin-off of that, I started saying we are diamonds in the diaspora. We really are. And sometimes the work that I do with words is telling people you have to do something uncomfortable. And that is sometimes it's standing in front of the mirror and proclaiming self-love. Yourself. Into yourself. And sometimes I would look in the mirror and say, Peju, well done. Oh, Peju, you are doing a great job. How awesome it is to create and co-create with the creator. Wow. Peju, you're stepping up. You've grown, because it's growing, right? The work of healing it's a growth journey.
Absolutely.
And so often we want to get to the destination, we want to be at that point where it's like, I'm healed, I'm whole, I'm well. The journey is what will be the making of each and every one of us.
That is true.
So we must start the journey. And part of that journey is, what are you telling yourself? Because we want quick fixes sometimes. And part of that quick fix is just give me somebody's words. Oh, please, just give me something. Let me just recite something, say a mantra, say a declaration. The work that I do, I say to people, and my book is all about, your words will heal your life. Your words will transform your life. Yes, you can listen to the big people who talk about self-talk, the power of self-talk and empowering beliefs. But again, in your quiet moments, what is your self-talk telling you? And believe me when I say this, you can influence your self-talk.
Wow.
And And then as you start to influence your self-talk, you will start to speak life into other people because you believe it for yourself. Words have energy. Words have power. We are, we're all Nigerian. We know we grew up in a society and maybe even with church-going families, and we understood the power of the spoken word.
Okay, that is
But
true.
we've become careless. I'm so stupid. Gosh, my husband is an idiot. My marriage is failing. My children, please. I mean, we need to take hold, literally take the hold of the horns of a bull, take hold of your words. And if it means you are not going to speak, except what you're speaking is empowering, it's hopeful, joyful, then choose not to say anything. It's okay. It's okay to be silent. So I think it starts with you. It starts with the corners of your inner world that nobody has access to. What are you saying? What are you hearing? What are you influencing? And then when you do that work, you can confidently, as an overflow, start speaking life over other people. The number of people who don't hear, gosh, you're doing a great job. Well done.
Yes.
Yeah.
The number of cashiers in shops or people in a restaurant, when you laugh and you're like, oh, thank you for that recommendation. I really enjoyed the meal. They look at you like, ooh, because they're not, are you about to tell me? They're not used to it. And so the work that I do with words it's knowing that these words have a life within them. They have energy within them. And as I speak them, I truly believe, and sometimes I see physically people taking those words and their body language changes. Shoulders become a bit more squared up. Mothers feel a sense of, you see me. Thank you. Yeah. So there is healing power in words, but if you don't know that, your words will not heal you.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you touched on that, because one of the things that for sure that I carry with me, I realized that, I read this years ago, negative words can be habit forming. So like you were saying, if you keep saying that insert whatever negative word, you will begin to believe that yourself.
Absolutely.
But I mean, you definitely spoke something to me when you said you stand in front of the mirror and you validate yourself. You speak those positive words to yourself. And there's a lot that we can do. Once you know who you are, the way you will interact with humanity will be different. I'm thinking about the respect, the honor, the recognition of our shared humanity. One of the things that I've always done when I go into like either a grocery store when the person who's serving me has a badge that has their name on it, I say, thank you, Peju. You understand? And then I've had a situation where the person was like, how do you know my name? And I'm like, you're wearing a badge. But this person but it's a valid thing to realize that this person has felt so invisible for only God knows how many hours that they've been working in that grocery store, and then someone actually calls out their name and they're like, oh, me? Never underestimate how powerful that is to convey that sort of, energy to somebody. I wanted to go back to you, Eniye, in your work as a leadership coach. And we've touched on this a little, but I think, hearing a little bit more about what you do when it comes to encouraging people, especially those with immigrant backgrounds, to embrace their cultural heritage. And we're not necessarily talking Nigerian here, even though that would be nice. But embracing their cultural heritage as a source of leadership strength. How do you do that?
This one is fresh, actually. This one is really fresh. But I think just tagging on to just the end of what you were talking about there, a lot of us from the diaspora, part of our cultural practice, actually, politeness. We've talked about respect, but politeness is also part of. But in some societies, that can be misinterpreted as weakness.
Yes, that is true.
And so I think there is something around not being shy to explain our culture to people. Say, no, actually, where I come from, it's actually polite to do that. where I come from is like, because it's part of, I think Peju talked about the oral history, the oral tradition, passing that down. This is how our children will remember what it's like to be Nigerian or Kenyan or whatever, wherever we're from, and I think that, it's not subservient to do that, whereas, that can be misinterpreted in some cultures. But so I think, speaking to your point, there is something around, again, taking people back to what has shaped you, what has made you, because what happens in this fast-paced AI world, technology-driven world that we live in is a lot of us have forgotten who we are.
Yes.
And we have to be reminded. We have to be reminded. And that's why, sometimes just even, the questions, the powerful questions, that we can ask, whether it's me asking my clients, whether it's us asking each other, whether it's in our friendship circles or in our families, is, what do you appreciate, about, being Nigerian, or about being Indian, or about being, wherever in the world people are from, taking stock of that. Because sometimes, as I said, it's so easy to erase a part of our history. I mean, enough of our history has been erased anyway, I mean, we're not even talking about colonialism here today, a lot of our history. So if we don't remind each other of who we really are and of where we're from, and invite each other, give each other permission to say, no, celebrate what makes you, celebrate what makes you, celebrate the things that are good about your culture. As we know, there are some aspects of culture, not all aspects of culture is good, let's face it. There are some, I mean, women are fighting against, subjugation today because cultures have placed them, in positions where, I remember coaching a client once who was told, because she was one of the first women to want to study engineering in her country, when she got the first day in the lecture hall, the professor said, oh, and I think there were maybe 5 women in the class altogether, says, oh, said to them, I don't know what you're doing here, because your certificate is only going to end up in the wall of a kitchen. And you think, what in the world? So culture has a lot to answer for. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the positive aspects of culture that we can remind. This is what, I mean, last year I went to Nigeria for my mother-in-law's funeral, and I came back with this sense of we went for a sad occasion, but there was just something, and I think Peju was saying, there's just something about coming back and you feel this sense of aliveness, the color, the vibrance. I wrote this thing about the sights and the smells of Lagos and the sound of Lagos. And, I often, when I'm doing stuff around the house, or when I just want to beat listen to my Afro beats and just kind of, there's just something about that. Or when we get a chance to put on our print fabrics and, all of that. There is something that is grounding about those things. Or from time to time when we get that craving, it was like, I just want my jollof rice. I just want my, snippets and all stuff. When the craving hits you, you know that that's a sign that it's your body, your mind, your psyche is telling you that you are from somewhere and you need that fix. You need to stay connected, And so I invite, my clients, wherever they're from. So what has shaped you? When those things come into the conversation, they're really, really important. Really, really important, because so often we want to fit into the mold, whether it's the corporate mold or whether it's a societal mold or whether it's, even relational modes, And I think something, even you mentioned couples earlier, sometimes you've got, mixed marriages, for example, and it's like, bring what, highlight what celebrates, the difference in your cultures, and bring that into it. I love it when my children ask me, Mom, how do you say this in your own language? Because you're not Yoruba, or when my son one time, got an app and decided I'm going to learn and he was learning, I was like, respect, you want to learn Yoruba, very much into his, into wanting to know about the culture. Now, when he goes and plays football, all he wants to wear is his Nigerian kits, and I'm like, you go, boy, so things like that, kind of make you feel like you are from somewhere. Actually, you belong somewhere. You have roots So I think, that's something that we need to remind each other about.
Thank you, Eniye. And I just realized that we've done something during this conversation. We've highlighted the Yoruba because you're our wife. But tell us, tell us a little bit about your culture, the language, because we are all Nigerian. Let our listeners know where you're from and what language you speak, so that it's not all about the Yoruba flavor here.
So really interesting. I'm from the Niger Delta of Nigeria, and my language is actually Ijo. But obviously, in my formative years, I grew up in Lagos, so Yoruba became kind of like the language that you kind of speak. All my friends, you rarely go anywhere and find Ijo people. To be honest, like there's no. I don't meet a lot of Ijo people a lot. So if you're out there and you're Ijo and you're listening to this, hey, let's hook up. Find me. I'll find you.
You heard it. You heard it. Yes. No.
I don't meet, a lot of Ijo
people. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I one of the things that we've talked about here is community and the importance of community in making you feel grounded, especially when you're in the diaspora. I was listening to what you were saying when it comes to, when you're in the corporate world and you feel so marginalized. There's this line in a song by, I think her name is Tenny. And she says, "Shebomo bani me," which means I'm royalty. And I remember that I actually had to sing those words to myself when I was in a less than pleasant situation at the workplace, and I knew that my identity was being compromised, and I had to remind myself that I had to do that mental exercise. And it was the words of Tenny's song that were in my head, saying "Shebomo bani me," and I remember I remember going into the restroom and actually in my head looking at myself in the mirror, that exercise that you do, and saying "Omo bani me," and it's so loaded in terms of, I deserve to be here. I deserve to take up space. This is my own way of saying that I'm showing up as me and as what I represent. And I mean, anyone listening to this that has, had to find themselves in those sorts of situations, I hope this empowers you. I hope this gives you the realness that you need. I wanted to pivot back to Peju and, talking about our Nigerian culture and how often we intertwine spirituality with daily life. And it depends on the kind of spirituality you choose, whether it's traditional, religious, or philosophical. How would you say this has informed your personal growth philosophies? We're a very spiritual culture. I remember there's a grand aunt, she's passed me, her soul rest in peace. You would never speak with her about the future without her saying, "Belogo alone by God's grace," because she knows that the future is not in her hands. It's in the hands of a spiritual power that's more powerful than her. And I actually adopted that as well. But how would you say that shows up in your own personal growth and experience, and has your work as a poet and the things that you do to convey the energy that you need to convey to the people that you work with and the people that you want to help?
Yeah, so I watched the movie Mufasa a few weeks ago. And we know the Lion King song. I mean, it's known all over the world, The Circle of Life. The Circle of Life, when you've not lost somebody close to you, is a great song. It's like the circle. It's a circle. But when you've lost somebody you love, the circle of life is painful. It's painful. And so watching Mufasa with my family after my father had passed away was a tearful reminder that there's a circle of life.
Yeah.
And I think spirituality, in the sense of us being African and part of the diaspora, is not something to be ashamed of. And like Eniye was saying, sometimes we code switch or cover up the parts of us that they're not acceptable. I don't want to draw any attention to myself. So I know I love God and I have a relationship with a higher power. I'm just going to put that aside.
Mm.
But more and more research has shown, even among the most senior leaders, that we are hungry for something to ground.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That is
We're
true.
really hungry because a lot of things don't cut it anymore. People we put our faith in have let us down in a public sense, I mean.
Yeah.
You know, and even in a private sense, for some people, when you put your hope in somebody, you think, man alive, gosh, I've been devastated. I've been taken advantage of. I've been made a fool of. So I want to say to the diasporans that our faith, our belief in a higher power, our understanding that it really is not all down to us and we really don't have control over anything or a lot of things is what a lot of people are crying out for. But if you keep hiding it, you will never connect to the people who are thirsty for it in your circle of influence. So my practice of writing poetry or speaking life through my words, I do it, like I said, in co-creation with the creator. And I really believe that when you open yourself up to co-creating with the creator, he's not a selfish God. He wants to create. He wants to keep creating. He wants you to partner with him. My way of partnering with him is with the words. It's to be able to write something significant that has life in it, whether that's through my book or through quotes or through posts. It is to speak up in places, to be a channel of light and blessing and life. When I'm speaking to women, when I'm speaking to mothers, I feel like the words that God gifts me, they come from a practice of silence and solitude. So I'm not even talking about stand here and shout and, surround yourself with people. No. There's a practice of spirituality where it's silence and it's solitude. Because like Eniye said, the world is super noisy. And to channel that inner voice, that inner spirit really wants the best for you. You need some times of silence and solitude. And usually, I'd say 11 out of 10 times when I'm asked to speak at an event or to perform poetry or to do a spoken word piece, I go into a birthing process with the creator. So I feel like I get pregnant with an idea and there's an internal sort of, going into labor and, there's this piece of work, this piece, these words that are flourishing wildly within me. And there's questioning in my spirit. Is this what you want me to say? And how do I give life to this? So people walk away and they are just never the same again. I trust that whatever work, I'm not saying, only creatives and artists have this sense of spirituality. Whatever work you have been called to do, having this sense of, I've been called into a higher purpose by a being, a creator, a force that is wiser and actually wants the best for me, wants to channel good into this world through me. You will do your work with a renewed sense of vision, mission, self-empathy, reflection. Because like Eniye said, when the world is busy, we don't even have time to reflect anymore. Goodness gracious, even the young people, on to the next thing, you're scrolling, you're looking.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
If all you do for the next 3 months is learn the power of reflection, you're on to a great.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I have so enjoyed this conversation, and unfortunately, we're coming close to the end. And
can I just say one thing, just tagging on to what Peju was saying?
Yes, please go ahead. So,
I think this is just really important on this topic of spirituality because, I remember, when someone asked me, the question, why self-awareness coaching? And I remember I just felt like self-awareness is a spiritual exercise. It's about opening the eyes of the blind. right? That's really what it is. And I think I remember delivering an organizational training one on spiritual intelligence, because that is the part in the business corporate world that is just gonna, it's a dirty secret, let's not talk about, right? Let's not, but actually you find that we are, whatever religion, whatever culture we come from, we are spiritual beings at the core of who we are. Yes. And so not giving people the opportunity to tap into, to discover, that side is a disservice to humanity. Because that is why humanity is broken. That is why, the world is the way it is. And so giving people that opportunity to tap into spiritual intelligence, awakens the consciousness more than anything else, like what Peju is saying, that sense of, whether it's intuition, we want to call it, or that sense of, or even the profound wisdom that comes from that no amount of money can buy. I think, wherever you are at, whoever you are, wherever you come from, I suppose we're all saying the same, that appeal to tap into, the spirit realm, to be able to discover more of who we are, because I believe that is the root of how we come alive. That is the root of how we own our authenticity, own who we are, own where we're from. It is, I love that word, Peju, that birthing process. It is a rebirth of who we are. To be able to tap into that is how we really do discover our true and authentic selves. And the power that comes from that, I think, is so undervalued, in the world today. Much to the detriment of the world, in fact. So I just wanted to tag that on.
No, and thank you for that. And I'm glad that you inserted the whole spiritual intelligence, that phrase, into the conversation, because I think for a long time there has been a discomfort among people in certain settings of speaking about spirituality in a setting that's not a religious setting or a church, and that now a lot of people need to tap into their spiritual intelligence, because at the end of the day, and I like what you said, Pedro, spirituality is what binds us. If you're not, if you're taking 3 months to, look inside yourself, inside your spirit, and see what kind of energy that you need to tap into in order to show up in the world in an authentic way. Eniye had mentioned her going to Nigeria recently, and I'm asking all of my guests this question. I'll start with you, Eniye. What do you miss the most about Nigeria?
Oh. Obviously my family, my parents, but I think just there's something about being in Lagos, especially, there's just something about the culture, the vibrance, the color, the warmth, the weather, obviously. The weather, the food, like we've all developed all kinds of food allergy being in the diaspora and all of that. But, just the authenticity of the food, the authenticity of the culture, just the music, the vibe, just that sense of, it's funny, the things that, might wind us up there, that, life moves at a slower pace. Actually, after a while, you might take a day or 2 or 3 to adjust, but actually you learn to appreciate that sense of slowness and stillness and quietness, and just kind of retune, to that frequency. But yeah, there is so much. It's the food, the music, the art, the everything, just the vibrance.
That's good. What about you, baby?
Lagos is not quiet to any.
No.
Oh my goodness.
What do I miss? I mean, everything Eniye said, defo, I miss that. I think when I started raising children here, what I really missed about Nigeria and about the Nigerian culture is knowing that other people had my children's back, and that I did not need to pay them for them. I'm not talking about here, I need a nanny. Okay, I need to pay a nanny, or an au pair. I need to pay an au pair, or a cook to, batch cook. And I'm talking about that sense of not just I have a community or I have a tribe, but that sense in that community that your kids are my kids. And because I want my kids to do well, that
Mm.
extends to your children.
Yeah.
And I just want to say to the diasporans, it's so easy to come here and to be busy. Of course, you have to put things in place, get your kids into the right school. If you have kids, settle into your job and into your role, find the right home in the right area, figure out where the best supermarket, all of that. You need to figure things out, and we get busy.
Mm.
Let us not get so busy that we're having to book to see each other 3 months in advance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that's true.
It's true.
Let us remember that we can each have a stake in each other's children doing well.
Wow. That's true.
Because I know what I had growing up. I know that my extended family looked out for me. It was not all up to my parents.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a sense here in the diaspora that, man, it's all up to, man, it's a lot. It's a heavy weight. It's like,
A heavy burden, yeah.
I can't go. Women are saying I can't go out because everybody is busy, too busy to just watch my child for an hour so I can go to the gym. That is what I miss. But I believe there are pockets of that sense of community in the diaspora. I'm not saying there isn't, but for those of you and us who don't have that, make time for it.
Yeah.
Make time.
We have to fight to create it. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to. And it goes back to something that I had touched on earlier in terms of intentionally creating the community that, yes, many of us come here with 2-3 suitcases and then we start to build. And building is not just buying the house or getting the job. It's also building a community that, I like what you said, that has your back, that is looking out for you, that's looking out for yours.
Yeah. You have my kids back. And I think sometimes we come here and we think the prosperity pie is so small. I know of good opportunities. I won't tell anyone. Because if I tell more people, then it takes less from my child. Guys, that prosperity pie, I have a spiritual practice and I know that spiritual pie is huge. You can eat it, have extra to save somewhere else.
Yes.
You can feast on it. It's dribbling out of your mouth and everyone can enjoy it. So don't get into that wrong mindset, that lie, that if you share the goodness of your own prosperity pie, it's taking less from you. No. It's actually empowering your corner. So let's truly be community. I love words. The word unity is in community.
Yes, that's true.
So let's be true community.
And I like what you said and the picture that you're painting, because someone once said there's always room at the table for everyone. And you just have to make that room. And the fact that I've never been comfortable with the competitive nature of the quote unquote rat race. Come and sit with me. Let's, and it comes from a place of empathy. You're carrying this load. Why don't I help you? As we end our time together, I wanted to give you both a chance to say, what should we expect from you next? I mean, you've written these phenomenal books. You're doing extremely good work. And I know that there's no shortage of things just because I know you guys. What should we expect from you next? Let me start with you, Eniye.
I think having caught the author bug, I definitely have a thirst for more. I'm currently working on volume 2 of my 91 Days to Self-Awareness Reflective Journal. Because of course, if it's 91 days will come to an end, right? So some people are already saying, how am I going to, do I need to do it all over again? I'm like, no, there is a second installment. So look out for that. Because I definitely do want to bring as many themes to the world to, raise self-awareness, because I really believe that the more we discover of who we are, the more wholesome and grounded and authentic we can live in this world as individuals and in community. And and we can leave this world a better place. So this is more opening the eyes of the blind, more self-discovery, for people. That's what I'm all about. I feel like that's my mission, that's my calling. So that's what I'm going to be doing.
And you're doing it so well. Peju, what should we expect from you?
Well, the book is there, A Poetic Odyssey of Proclamations. I've just recorded the audio book. So that should be out soon. For those of you who like listening to books, the book will be out on Audible soon. So that's the first thing. The second thing is my husband and I, we're big on helping and equipping couples to thrive in all seasons of life. We're big on marriage ministry. We're big on centering marriages as a force for good in society. So we recently kicked off our show, The Jedi and the Spark Show. You can catch that on YouTube. We've just released episode 1. We're going to do one a month.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
I'm going to look out for that. Yeah.
So The Jedi and the Spark Show on YouTube. Episode 1 is available. Episode 2 will come out later on in February. And lastly, this concerns Eniye and I. We are speaking at a conference in April called Core 2025.
Okay.
Come on now. Yes.
So that's an incredible leadership conference in England, but feel free to travel. You're welcome from wherever you are. And it's really about, again, we've talked about self-awareness. We've talked about, leaning into your own inner wisdom, tapping in on your leadership journey to what are the areas that help you to thrive. So we're both going to be involved in that, as well as our husbands. We're doing this in partnership with our husbands.
Oh,
That's right.
So
How
Core
fun is that?
2025, April 29th in the UK, in London. So
Oh,
So
good.
come on, all of the Nigerians or diasporans in the UK, go to Core Leaders International, register, and we hope to see you there.
Yes. Peju, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. Do you want to close us out with some words of therapeutic wisdom? Please, I know you can. Come on.
I would love to. I would. So it's the month of love. So
we're recording this in February, yes.
So we're told, but every month is a month of love. And I think that we've touched on the power of self. We've heard so much. You can't give what you don't have. Put on your oxygen mask first. So I'm going to read a poem about self-love.
Wow.
Because when it starts with self, it's not selfish. It's actually selfless when you start with yourself, because you can give more.
Yeah.
So self-love. Okay. How do I love me? Let me count the ways. Not only on good days when I feel the sun's rays. I long to gaze at my current phase and express self-love with a powerful phrase. I am a beautiful blaze. This is my current craze as I navigate life's maze. Watch me dazzle and daze. I will amaze. My glorious reflection says that I love me in all ways, till the end of my days, even as my hair glows with grays. Thank you.
Oh, wow. That was powerful. Oh, my goodness. Eniye Oshunbiyi, thank you so much for your time. This has been such a time.
Thank you.
What a conversation. One of my key takeaways from that was what Peju said. If all you do for the next 3 months is learn the power of reflection, you're onto a great start. That is so profound, because the truth is you have to know yourself enough before you can give back to the world. Thank you for listening. And on the next episode of Tokunbo.
Because one of the things I say sometimes is, I think every writer is just a reader that has graduated. The version of Nigeria I grew up with, when I was fully immersed in it, that version will always be stuck with me. And maybe that's why a lot of the time when I write, I tend to write about 90s Nigeria or 2000s or pre-2015. Right? Because before that, I used to still visit Nigeria very frequently. And since then, it's been longer and longer.